A small, snow-covered cottage in the French Alps. A dream destination for winter sports enthusiasts, but also for most tourists. The sun glinting off the ice crystals on the windows, and the silence, broken only by the chirping of birds. Inside the beautiful winter cottage lie 5 bodies. The dark brown solid wood interior is speckled with bloodstains. Yet, just a few hours later, the chalet will shine again in its former glory, and nothing will hint at the gruesome crime that took place inside. Only in the cracks of the beautiful parquet floor does something still lie hidden. A clue to the gruesome truth.
It is April 12, 2003. 14-year-old Mario LeBlanc makes his way through the snow-covered streets of Grand-Bornand. This small village, nestled among the mountains of the French Alps, is a popular destination for winter sports enthusiasts, or simply for those who want to spend their vacation in one of the luxurious log cabins and drink hot cocoa by the fireplace. Fed up with the many exams and classes of the past few days, Mario is looking forward to finally seeing something different and getting back on his snowboard after a long time. Since the peak season for winter sports is already over, apart from the occasional tourist, the only people out and about now are those who actually live here. One of them is Graziella Ortolan, Mario's mother. His parents are divorced. The 14-year-old lives with his father, but whenever he has time off, he travels to Les Grand-Bornand to spend time with his mother. Mario comes to a stop in front of one of the chalets. The luxurious wooden house has hardly changed since his last visit. It is one of the largest in the area and probably costs a small fortune, but Graziella doesn't have to worry about money. A few years ago, she married Xavier Flactif. The contractor from northern France found the area around Les Grand-Bornand so beautiful that he decided to settle there. In 1999, he moved in with Graziella to the roughly 300 square meter chalet, which he had previously had built himself. In addition, he now owns numerous vacation homes in the area. Javier not only hosted lavish parties at his house, but also owned 4 cars and numerous motorcycles, not all of which could fit in the house's garage and were displayed on the street. You can probably imagine that Javier had many envious people who didn't approve of the way he flaunted his wealth. But behind what the public saw of him lay a loving family man. Graziella and Javier had 3 children. Gregory, Letizia, and Sarah were the pride and joy of their lives. But Mario, Graziella's son from her first marriage, was always welcome in the family as well. It's just past 10 a.m. when Mario presses the doorbell of the large wooden house all the way down. No one answers, just like the first 3 times he tried. Mario knows that his step-siblings, who are now between 7 and 11 years old, have been training for a ski race over the past few days. But he thought that at least his mother would be home waiting for him. After all, she knew he was coming to visit today. But even a call to her goes unanswered. From where Mario can see inside the house, everything looks normal but deserted. Mario decides to wait in front of the house. The 5 of them would surely be back by lunchtime at the latest. The morning passes, and Mario starts to feel colder and colder. When, even after 3 hours, no one from the family comes home or answers Mario's calls, he decides to go to Christine, a friend of his mother's who lives nearby, and wait there. Mario spends the whole day and even the night at her place. The next morning, both Mario and Christine are worried. Maybe there was an accident, which is why Graziella hasn't been in touch. Anything else wouldn't be like her. The two decide to take a closer look at the house.
They manage to gain access through a side entrance. Their suspicion that the house is deserted is confirmed. It's quiet in the house. Whenever Mario is here, the house is usually full of life. That's not the only thing that strikes him as odd. Although Xavier is particularly strict about turning off electrical appliances when no one is home, 2 computers are on. Besides, everything is very neat and tidy. That isn't unusual in and of itself, but the couple's 3 children usually make sure there are at least a few things lying around here and there. What also doesn't fit the overall picture is the fact that the pillows, blankets, and sheets are missing from all the beds upstairs. Christine alerts the police and reports the strange occurrences. The police search the house, and aside from the items already mentioned, find no further clues as to the Flactifs' whereabouts. What is striking, however, is that there is still a pot of food on the stove. Consequently, there is actually nothing to suggest that the family has gone on vacation or planned to disappear. The next day, the police begin questioning the neighbors. They quickly notice that envy is the dominant theme. Many people, especially towards Xavier, have a negative attitude. They don't like the way he flaunts his wealth. Furthermore, he owns many of the surrounding houses, and Raphael is known for charging high rents. During a TV interview with David Hotyat, the family's neighbor, the envy becomes clear. He speaks primarily of the many cars and the expensive interior of the house. 4 days later, the district attorney's office orders a thorough search of the house. The investigators must have overlooked something. This time, the police quickly notice the contrast between the ground floor and the first floor. While the living room in the entryway appears to have been cleaned almost meticulously, the upper floor is chaotic. Patches of carpet have been cut out, and entire sections of wallpaper are missing. Several hours pass with the investigators making no progress. It seems as though what happened in the beautiful house will remain a mystery. But when the investigators search the living room's hardwood floor more closely, they find a broken piece of a tooth between the floorboards. In the next few minutes, 6 more pieces follow the first one. They are all so tiny that they slipped into the small gaps in the parquet. Behind a curtain in the living room, the investigators finally find a .635 caliber shell casing. Next to it, tiny blood spatters are visible on the wood. This leaves no doubt that a crime has taken place in this house. However, further clues are still needed to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. Since it would take forever to search the nearly 400 square meter chalet with the small group of investigators, the police request assistance from the National Gendarmerie. The very next day, a massive team arrives to search the house, room by room, using luminol. This is a chemical compound that can make bloodstains visible, even if they have been wiped away, and the result is shocking. There is blood everywhere in the house. The police even described their discovery as a veritable bloodbath. In the children's rooms, on the stairs, and in most of the other rooms, there are large amounts of blood. In addition, bloody drag marks are found in the hallways, and beneath a rug, there are even the bloody outlines of a body. However, it is still unclear whether the family was the victim of this crime or whether they might actually be the perpetrators. At this point, the public suspects that Xavier murdered his family and fled abroad. However, it is also considered possible that Graziella wanted to break up with him and that Xavier murdered her and kidnapped their children. But there are other leads as well. For one thing, it was known that Xavier occasionally engaged in shady business dealings, which gave rise to rumors that he was actually deeply in debt and murdered his family out of desperation. And second, a week later, his red Toyota Land Cruiser is found abandoned at the Geneva airport. Here too, an examination using luminol reveals that the entire trunk is covered in blood. This naturally reinforces the suspicion that Xavier fled abroad after murdering his family. On July 15th, the lab results for the blood samples finally arrive. Blood from all 5 family members is found both in the house and in the car, including Xavier's. It can even be pinpointed. Down in the laundry room, there is a large amount of Graciella's blood. In a corner of the living room, there is blood from their daughter, Sarah. On the radiator, there is blood from Gregory and Xavier. In one of the children's rooms is Letitia's blood. The tooth fragments can be matched to her. The amount of blood is so immense that it is assumed none of them could have survived. Now that it is certain Xavier did not murder his family, the public's new theory suggests the family was murdered due to Xavier's shady business dealings. Xavier had over 70 bank accounts and had already been on trial in the past for his business dealings. It is speculated that this is also the reason why he moved to the remote Alpine village. It is now also known that various valuables as well as Xavier's work laptops were stolen. This too could be an indication of an angry business partner. In addition to the victim's blood, the police have identified another DNA sample in the house. This most likely belongs to the perpetrator. A large-scale operation is being launched to collect saliva samples from all residents who agree to participate. This process rules out over 300 people. What is far more interesting to the police, however, is that all residents asked for a sample agreed immediately. All except one. David Hotyat, the family's neighbor, did not provide a sample. When the police cordoned off the area at the time, he watched the proceedings intently through binoculars. The officers pointed out to him that he would make himself a suspect if he didn't provide a sample, whereupon he agreed after all. And 2 days later, they had confirmation. His DNA matched that found at the crime scene. David has lived in Le Grand-Bornand for 2 years. He has 2 young children with his wife, Alexandra Lefebvre. Money is always tight for him. David works as a car mechanic and Alexandra as a cleaning lady. She too speaks negatively in an interview following the family's disappearance. She had worked for the Flactifs, but only for a week. She spoke of constant problems, saying that people were always calling and being rudely brushed off by Xavier. Due to their low income, the Hotyats had trouble paying their rent. And perhaps you can already guess who their landlord was, Xavier Flactif. They had argued often in the past because Xavier raised the rent and rented out the family's house to others during the peak vacation season. Yet, in their view, Xavier already had so much money. David and Alexandra were particularly close friends with another couple, Stefan Haremsa and his wife Isabel. David and Stefan had already attracted attention in the past for committing minor crimes. For example, they siphoned gas from other cars and stole it. Despite all this, the police still need more evidence. It's also not yet clear whether he committed the murder alone or had help. The police begin tapping his phone and monitoring his car. Through various phone calls with Alexandra, it quickly becomes clear that something must have happened in April. Alexandra mentions that she has felt uneasy ever since and no longer knows whether she can trust Isabel. On September 17, 2003, the police had enough evidence and arrested all 4 suspects. In David and Alexandra's house, they found all of the Flactifs' missing valuables, and in their garage, they even found toys that belonged to Gregory, Letitia, and Sarah. Contrary to expectations, David was immediately cooperative. He confessed to the crime during his very first interrogation. He says he was angry about the high rent and the fact that their house was being sublet during the holidays. On April 11th, he arrived at their house at the same time as Xavier's children. The three let him in, and he waited inside for Xavier. He wanted to talk to Xavier about the rent again, but the conversation escalated. A shot was accidentally fired from David's gun, fatally wounding Xavier. In a panic, he then killed all the witnesses. He wrapped the bodies in blankets and sheets from the bedroom and placed them in Xavier's car. Afterward, he cleaned the entire house and drove to a forest 10 kilometers away with several gasoline cans and the bodies. There, he laid the bodies down, doused them with gasoline, and set them on fire. A few days later, he parked the car at Geneva Airport and sent the pistol to his brother in northern France. Alexandra, Isabelle, and Stéphane confirm David's statement and say they themselves had nothing to do with the crime. However, the police doubt this sequence of events. For one thing, it is virtually impossible that David could have managed all of this in a single night. Furthermore, to burn 5 bodies almost without a trace in sub-freezing temperatures and snow, one would have needed large quantities of gasoline, but above all, several hours of time. After 3 hours, as David stated, not even a fraction of everything would have burned. Furthermore, David testified that he used wood to fuel the fire. According to calculations, however, it would have taken around 800 kilograms of wood to keep a fire of that size going for so many hours. There was also quite deep snow in the area. Keeping a large fire burning there for a long time isn't that easy. Even hoisting the bodies onto the woodpile wouldn't have been easy to accomplish on his own. All of this, however, reveals something about the crime. It must have been planned and not committed in the heat of the moment. After several hours of questioning, Stéphane finally admits that David and he had planned the crime together. They had already gone to the family's house on April 9th with the plan that he would kill the children and David would kill the parents. But an argument broke out in front of the house. Stéphane has second thoughts and calls off the whole operation. A few days later, David returns alone to the Flactifs' chalet to kill them. Alexandra eventually confirms this account as well and adds that David was jealous and had been planning the murder for weeks. In the months leading up to it, his jealousy had caused him to develop a genuine hatred for the family. David remains in pre-trial detention, and the other 3 are charged with covering up a murder. It remains unclear, however, whether David committed the murder alone. A bloodstain analysis is expected to shed light on this. The conclusion is reached that Xavier was killed by a gunshot. All other family members died from a blow with a blunt object. An analysis of the family's phone records also revealed that Graziella was still on the phone at 5:30 p.m. and Xavier shortly after 6 p.m. Based on this, the crime is reconstructed as follows. Around 5 p.m., the children came home from school. Shortly thereafter, David must have gained access to the house. Either he simply rang the doorbell, or he had already entered the chalet with the children when they arrived home. First, David overpowered 7-year-old Gregory and killed him in the living room. 10-year-old Sarah witnessed the whole thing and tried to flee. Initially, presumably through the back door, but it was locked. On her way to the front door, David caught up with her and killed her. Letizia, who had been upstairs in the children's room the whole time, heard her siblings crying and screaming and hid behind the bed. David came up the stairs, found her behind the bed, and beat her until she died from severe head injuries. Graziella had been in the laundry room in the basement the entire time and was unaware of the murder of her children. She was likely either listening to music or the loud washing machines and closed doors were enough to muffle the screams from the upper floors. It was there that she was overpowered and murdered. Xavier didn't come home until some time later. David had been waiting for him there, and a fight broke out between the 2 men, ending with David shooting him. When confronted with this, David confesses that this is what happened, and adds that he and Stefan burned the bodies over the course of several days. It is suspected that he also had help cleaning the house. Whether only Stefan helped him, or Isabelle and Alexandra as well, is unclear. In a letter from David to his father, he writes that he had a lapse. However, psychological evaluations confirm that he is criminally responsible. He merely has an immature personality. A month and a half later, David recants his confession and claims he did not commit the crime. He is innocent. However, the evidence against him is sufficient, and so he is sentenced to life in prison in 2006. This means he must remain in prison for at least 22 years. David files an appeal, but withdraws it himself shortly thereafter. Stefan Harimsa is sentenced to 15 years in prison for complicity. Alexandra Lefebvre is sentenced to 10 years in prison for covering up a crime and criminal conspiracy. Isabel Harimsa is sentenced to 7 years in prison for the same reasons. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, and in this case, it cost 5 people their lives. I feel especially sorry for the children. It's hard to imagine the fear Letizia must have felt as she hid behind her bed and heard David, who had just murdered her siblings, coming up the stairs toward her, step by step. And all of this just because he was jealous and couldn't bear to see them living such a luxurious life. What do you think about this case? Feel free to write your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment there. Other than that, there isn't much more to say. Thank you so much for your support and for watching the video all the way through, and I hope to see you again next week. Until then, ciao.